Welcome back to the channel and thank you for being here. In today's video, I'm going to answer the question whether force feedback is really worth it. And you might be surprised with what I've got to say. So stick around, stay tuned after a quick word from FS Academy. And they're back in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 with their all-new 30 mission training pack called Interceptor, which is designed for flying IFR like a professional and created by a real-world airline captain. This is the most authentic and immersive instrument flight experience you can get. And when you're in VR, it really feels like the instructor is right there beside you. You can learn VOR and NDB navigation, learn how to master that ILS, and put your skills to the test and go beyond your limits. It is a fantastic and rewarding experience when you learn something new in this hobby. So go check out FS Academy in the description below. Okay, so let's crack on with this question whether force feedback is really worth it, especially for you watching this video right now. I'm glad to say in today's market, force feedback is getting a lot more affordable. Gone are the days, it seems, where force feedback is only really for the rich. And I'm glad to say that hardware specialists such as Moser, FlightSim.com with their CLS 60, 120 and now force feedback rudder pedals, and Wing are getting into the mix, helping to bring the price of force feedback a lot further down than it ever has been before. But what exactly is force feedback and why is it so important when flying? Essentially, it allows you to feel your aircraft, feel the turbulence, feel the engine vibration, and a really good yoke such as the CLS 60 makes you feel like you're connected to the actual control surfaces. For example, when you're banking left and right, you feel the wing forces and the pressure, especially when trimming out the aircraft. It's one of those things that, of course, when you've experienced it, it is very, very difficult to go back to a regular flight control. However, it's not all good news because there is that other side of force feedback technology, and I like to call it faff. There is a lot of faffing about with force feedback controls because really to get the best out of the experience, you need profiles and to be able to understand the software. Also, there's a lot more to think about when starting up your flight simulator. Imagine, for example, you just want to go for a casual flight, but you have to make sure that you switch on your force feedback in a certain order, make sure that the software is up to date, and then make sure it's connected to the flight sim even before you've actually got the VR headset on and you're ready to go. So my point being is that it's not going to be for everyone, and I think it's mainly for those out there that really truly want to feel what it's like to pilot an aircraft. Because at the time of this recording, I think it's fair to say that the force feedback software that I've used anyway, while it's getting better and more intuitive, there's still a long way to go to make it really user-friendly. And if you're the kind of person that shies away from tweaking your flight sim and getting it really to where you want it to be, then perhaps something like an alpha yoke might actually be a better option for you. And in terms of a flight stick that's not force feedback, that doesn't break the bank, well, I still recommend the Gladiator NXT, which I've got a full review on the channel. So even though, of course, force feedback is one of those game-changing moments that when you feel the aircraft through your flight controls and when it gives you feedback, whether it's a full vibration as you take off, the thump on landing, or the trim forces being relieved as you perfectly trim out the aircraft when you're flying, in sightseeing. Of course, as well, when it comes to the Moser AB9 flight control stick, things like pressing the trigger and feeling the missile or the cannons shaking your hand to bits. It does, it gives you an absolutely amazing and immersive experience, don't get me wrong. It's still not going to be for everyone, regardless of whether you can afford it or not, because there is that extra investment in time getting those settings dialed in. And I don't think many people on YouTube will sort of tell you that other side of it. And even I've fallen victim not getting the correct feeling of an aircraft and getting very frustrated with the settings. Stating the obvious here, but it's not always very clear how different the feeling should be between flying an Airbus and a Warbird like we're seeing right now. And it does take time to get those settings dialed in. And if you don't mind doing that, then absolutely fill your boots, because the world of force feedback will completely transform your hobby. There's no two ways about it. But I do think it's important to let you know all the details of what it's really like to live with all these force feedback controls now that I have for over a year now. And I am glad to say that this will be an easier thing to get to grips with, and it won't feel so overwhelming as the software improves. Moser has already started to improve their software, and it's great to see automatic profiling becoming more of a norm. But at the moment, it's still lacking quite badly with the Moser software. When it comes to the flightsim.com, they also have an automatic profiling system, which means basically as soon as you change your aircraft, the force feedback software will automatically match the correct aircraft type. But the problem is there is still not enough profiles out there, in my opinion, and it still seems a little bit unclear where the great profiles actually are. And to be honest, we really could do with getting real world pilots on board to test these specific flight peripherals so that they match the real world counterparts. And that's no mean feat, is it, really? And I think until we get to that point, there's always going to be that sort of questioning whether this profile is better than this profile, much like VR settings guides, and it starts to become something other than the enjoyment of just flying and enjoying the force feedback, because you're comparing constantly all of your settings. I'm not trying to put you off, I just want to be realistic about the experience of force feedback and some of the pitfalls when it comes to making sure everything's set up correctly. So just to finish off, I do get asked this all the time: which is my favourite yoke? Well, it is the Scylla 60, but only because of the feel. It feels incredibly realistic, particularly in the way that it feels like you're connected to the almost like the cables of the aircraft, alongside the hardware trim, which also feels a lot more responsive, and just the general fit and finish and feel of the yoke feels a lot more authentic. But I must admit, the Moser, I feel, is more of a better all-rounder, especially with all those buttons and switches. And there is one thing that the Moser does better. I still feel it has less cogging. It's ever so slight now, though, and I must admit the flightsim.com Scylla 60 does feel a lot smoother than it used to. In terms of the AB9 base and flight stick, well, it's a no-brainer. I absolutely love it and use it all the time. Another quick question I get asked a lot is, what's better? What's the best purchase, a motion rig or force feedback? That's a tricky one and depends on your budget, but I would possibly go for force feedback controls first, because it really does make a massive difference, and you know, it'll be easy for you to get on that ladder, so to speak, without spending loads of money on a motion rig. But of course, both of them together is quite an experience, and it gets very close to the real thing. Anyway, that will do for today's video. I hope it's been of some help to you and gives you an insight into what it's like to own force feedback controls on a long-term basis. Thank you so much for watching, as always. It really means a lot. Please feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you again in the next video. Take care and bye for now.